Napoleon Bonaparte and the Apostle Paul are the two most famous prisoners of history. One because the peace of the world demanded it, the other because he sought to bring peace that the world could not give and could not take away. Napoleon was known for the cities and the homes he had devastated. Paul, the cities and homes that were blessed by his presence and his message, and still today. Napoleon shed rivers of blood to float his ambitions. Paul, the only blood he shed was the wounds that were for Christ's sake that he endured himself. Napoleon could trace his path by the dead stretched over the world wherever he traveled. Paul could trace his path from prison to death by the souls that he had gathered, including us, into the kingdom of God. Napoleon said, "I love nobody, not even my brothers." It's not strange then at the end of his life, on his rock prison in the South Atlantic, that he said, "I wonder if there's anyone in the world who really loves me." Paul from prison sent messages of hope and love, which are still a strength today. You know, as we know that in the end result with all of us, that one is fortunate to have a few good friends. Do you have any? Aren't they special? A few good friends that you can count on. Paul had 3 such friends. He had first Christ. Second, Luke. He said, "Luke, the beloved physician, is with me." And Timothy, the half Greek, half Hebrew, my son in the faith, he called him. You know, if you form a friend in shipwreck, you never forget that friend. The hammer of adversity pounds us together with some friends, and what you share never fades. Have you found it to be true? There's some through life that are that way. Paul's last letter to Timothy, whom he had left in charge of the church in faraway Ephesus, he wants to Timothy, Paul is writing from prison, and he wants Timothy to come be with him there in Rome in his prison. If you take that text in 2 Timothy, the 4th chapter, verses 9 through 13 with me, let's examine it for a bit. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 9 through 13. Beginning at verse 9 in 2 Timothy 4. He says, "Be diligent to come to me quickly." Now he's writing to Timothy. "Be diligent to come to me quickly. For Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world, and has departed for Thessalonica. Crescens has left for Galatia, Titus for Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me," he says, "and get Mark and bring him with you when he comes, for he's useful to me for ministry. And Titius I've sent to Ephesus." And he continues in verse 13 to Timothy, "Bring the coat that I left with Carpus at Troas when you come, and the books, especially the parchments, bring them with you. Stop at Troas on the way and pick up my books," he said. For Paul was a scholar to the end. We know that if you make good friends with books, they will never leave you, they will never forsake you. Have you read these books that they're still with you, that you still remember these books that you've read? In 1 Timothy 4:13, when you go back from 2 Timothy to 1 Timothy 4:13, Paul had written this there in the 4th chapter of 1 Timothy, verse 13. He says, "Till I come, give attention to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. In his first letter to Timothy, he had urged him to read. He now says, Timothy, come and bring the books with you. I want to read, Paul says. He's in prison. It's the last part of his life, but he says, I want to read. And then he says, bring the cloak. Wow. What a robe that must have been that the Apostle Paul sent for. It would have been wet with the mist of the Mediterranean Sea, the dust of the roads that he'd covered, red with the stains of the beatings and the wounds that they'd given to him. You see, it was getting cold in Rome. Summer was leaving, and Paul wants his robe to keep him warm. But most of all, above all of that, Paul wants Timothy, this young man, to come and be with him. Our text in 2 Timothy 4 there, I would point you back to it in two verses, verses 9 and verse 21, if you will. 2 Timothy 4 and verses 9 and 21. Just skip from 9 down to 21. He says in verse 9, do thy diligence, Timothy, to come shortly unto me. And then he wrote right before the close of the letter, verse 21. Do thy diligence to come before winter. Why would he want him to be sure he came before winter? Because when the winter set in, the cold winter and the freeze of that, the season for navigation upon the Mediterranean Sea was dangerous for ships to venture out to sea at all. How dangerous? Paul's story of his last shipwreck is a demonstration of that. If Timothy doesn't come right away, if he waits till winter, he will have to wait till spring to come. And Paul has this premonition. He has this feeling that he's not going to last out the winter. This is it for his human sojourn on this world. Verse 6 in 2 Timothy 4:6, he had said there, if we go back to verse 6 in that chapter, the time of my departure is at hand. Now, there's no record that Timothy went, but we like to think that Timothy did not waste a single day. Okay? That he, after receiving the letter from Paul, he raced to Rome, got a ship, raced to Rome, found Paul in prison, read to him, wrote his last letters with him, and walked with him to the execution block. They're a friend to the last. Before winter or never. Some things will never be done if not before winter. Autumn will go. Winter will pass. Springtime will appear next year, and its flowers will appear on the graves of some of our opportunities that we have right now. They'll be gone. The golden gates are open this fall, that by next fall, by next year this time, will be forever shut. There are voices speaking to us today, which a year from now will be silent. For some opportunities that come to us now, it may be that it'll be before this winter or never. All seasons are beautiful. Winter, clear, cold nights, stars like silver-headed nails driven up into the sky as you look up. But then it gets cold. And spring comes with the green growth and flowers and hope and life. And then summer comes with the gentle breezes and the winds in the top of the trees and the birds and the warmth and the water. But autumn, there's nothing like it. The forest of trees, yellow, black, pale green, bright reds, oranges. But how quickly fall passes. In fact, autumn, fall is a symbol of all that fades. Today I see the beginnings of fall. We're into fall. The leaves on the trees, some are beautiful, aren't they? But some are already starting to fall. The trees come quickly in their splendor, but I know, and you know, every year you have experienced this in your life, that the splendor that will soon come will soon leave. The rain will fall. The winds will blow. The trees will be stripped and barren. Therefore, there's something about every returning autumn, the fall season, that brings hope, the sense of the value of life's opportunities. Two things about life's opportunities I would present to you today: their brevity and their beauty. Taking our application from this message of Paul from prison to Timothy, in far-off Ephesus, to Timothy, come before winter. Listen with me to some of the voices that are speaking to us, which by next autumn may be forever silenced. There are three voices that I think of today. One is a voice of reformation. Second is a voice of affection. And thirdly, the voice of Christ. The voice of reformation. Character can be improved. You know that, right? Character can be improved. It can be reformed in reformation. But not just at any time. There are favorable seasons when God can use and reform us better than at other times. On the cool fall nights, I used to come when I was courting Patty, and I would look at the steel mills in Pittsburgh. On the cool fall nights, the red molten metal, how the molten metal, bright red, soft, and it had been heated up and it was ready for the molds. And men were in appropriate gear with their all dressed up in the long tongs in hand, ready to seize the fiery coals and the porous molten flowing metal and put it into the molds. But if that flowing mass is allowed to cool beyond a certain temperature, it gets too hard for the molds, and you can't make the steel. There are times when life's metal is ready to be worked into God's design for us. But if permitted to cool, and we do not let God act, it tends toward a state of fixation, making us impossible to work with God and with man. The angel at the pool of Bethesda. The sick were to step in at just the right time as the angels trouble the waters. There's an opportunity for healing there for the people. But wait until the waters are still again, and too late. Not going to happen. You can build a bonfire anytime. We have in this church men that are capable of going down to the bottom there next to Big Walnut and building a nice bonfire anytime. But the refining fire of the Spirit, that is different. There is that moment. There's that time. There's that season. Yes, there's a voice of reformation. There is that time when God can work on us and bring about the desired effect. So yes, there's a voice of reformation that speaks to us to this fall season, and then there's a voice of affection. Suppose Timothy mused, well, I know I got this letter from Paul, and I love him, but I've got to clear matters up first here in Ephesus before I go there. Finally, the cold weather set in, the ice, the storms, no ships for Italy till spring. All Timothy is thinking about, all winter is condemning himself, wondering, how is Paul doing? He has no phones, no telegraph, no texting, no emails, no smartphones, no way to be in touch with Paul as the season for navigation on the Mediterranean stops during the wintertime. But you can bet on the first vessel of spring, Timothy is on that first vessel, and he goes to Rome and he inquires about Paul. And they say, oh, Paul, well, he was beheaded this winter. You're Timothy? Every time the jailer put the key in the cell door, Paul called your name. How Timothy would have wished that he had come before winter. I read a story of a son who felt the urge to write his mother. He writes her. Soon after that, he got a call, come home, Mom is dying. He flew home that night and found Mother still living, smiling, and her letter under his pillow. How glad he was that he wrote that letter. There are two facts of life. One is that we always hurt the one we love, and the second is we always hurt most by the one that we love. There is within each of us this fall season that gnawing hurt that has been done to us, that we cling to, or that someone we love feel that we have wronged them. Today, as we enter this holiday season at the end of the year, this fall season that will soon turn into winter, that window of opportunity may be open to bring about peace and harmony, to do something about four relationships. That first step may never come from the other person. Do you need to make that step, I ask you? That window of opportunity may be wide open. Just a crack may be briefly there, and tomorrow it may slam shut, never to be opened again. What will you do with those opportunities? I would remind you that Peter and James and John never had another opportunity to stay awake and pray with Christ that lonely night in Gethsemane. They never had a chance to do that again. If not before winter, some things are never. We have considered the voice of reformation and the voice of affection. Now let me speak to you of the third voice that speaks to us this autumn season, the voice of Christ himself. In the book of Hebrews, the 3rd chapter, verses 7 and 8, are some pertinent words that it would be heedful for each of us to listen to. Hebrews, the 3rd chapter, verses 7 and 8. And this is referring to the work of Christ. Hebrews 3, 7 and 8. Now, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts. The reason for this uncertainty, the reason that we need to do it now is two things. The uncertainty of human life and the disposition of our heart could change. It could be warm now, wanting to make things right or get things going good. It could change. I assure you, the voice of Christ is always this. The voice of Christ is always this. Follow the promptings of the Spirit that He sends to you. That's His voice. Today, never put off tomorrow, always today, never tomorrow. That's the voice of Christ. And do it before winter, please. 17 days ago, the date October 22, a group of sincere believers gathered as expected that 171 years ago, on October 22, 1844. And they expected that 171 years ago that Jesus would come when? That day. To them, there was no expected tomorrow. They did not expect tomorrow. No putting off to anything until later. And as the hours crept onward that day, and Christ had not appeared, the midnight hour approached. They really, don't sell them short. They really wanted and expected to see Jesus face to face. And the cry went up from them as they gathered, "Oh, Jesus, come before midnight, please." They were wrong on the date. They were right in their hearts, and they were correct in their preparation, I say to you. To all of us today, let our cry be, come before winter. Let me ask you in this season, let not your hearts grow cold. Won't each of you press together? Pray as one. Obey the promptings of the Holy Spirit. Put off nothing. Today is the time. Come. Let us do all that He prompts. And may that time come before winter.
Jesus said, "Here I stand, won't you please let me in?" And you said, "I will tomorrow." Jesus said, "I am He who supplies all your needs." And you said, "I know, but tomorrow, I'll give my life tomorrow. I thought about today, but so much easier to say. Tomorrow, I promise you tomorrow, better choose the Lord today. For tomorrow very well might be too late. Jesus said, "Here I stand, won't you please take my hand?" And you said, "I will tomorrow." Jesus said, "I am He who supplies all your needs." And you said, "I know, but tomorrow, I'll give my life tomorrow. I thought about today, but so much easier to say. Tomorrow, I promise you tomorrow, tomorrow very well might be too late. Forget about tomorrow. Won't you give your life today? Oh, please, don't just turn and walk away. Don't let this moment slip